Welcome to the garden. Today I'm going to be doing some maintenance on my stacking Jade. I think these are my favorite succulent. They just have such a beautiful height. I love how vertically they grow. I especially love how easy they are to propagate. All of these plants came from just a few cuttings a couple years ago. I want to start with my floating cutting. This has been propagating in water for over 6 months. That is just incredible. It's grown about 3 or 4 inches just using water. It's really amazing. All I did was set this little crown cutting on top of this foam so that it could float in the water. And it's way too top heavy to float now, so I have it just kind of wedged in there. But it's still doing really well. It looks incredible. It's got a really hardy set of roots. They're kind of covered in algae, but it doesn't seem to hurt the plant. The only bit of damage is the bottom leaf is starting to rot. You'll notice a little bit of red coloration on the leaves, but that is entirely normal this time of year. Now let's take a closer look at each plant individually. We'll check in on their progress and do a little bit of maintenance. We'll start with just the best looking plant, because I'm not going to be doing any maintenance on this. Look at how vertically these grow. It's just incredible. Some of these are starting to lean, but I don't think they're too top heavy yet where I have to cut them back. A few months ago, they would have all looked like this. Just a very simple stem cutting. And they sprout 2 crowns out of the top, sometimes lower down. Here's a new cutting with 2 brand new crowns. So you can see it used to be just this top leaf. This one in the front has actually sprouted 4. The 2 that it previously sprouted are so tall that it sprouted 2 more. The next planter is really similar. It started off as a bunch of stem cuttings, but now just look at how full it is. You can see how tall this one's getting. Look at all those leaves. It's really amazing. So eventually, I will want to cut these back just so they don't topple over. So let's take a look at one that's not doing quite so well. This one used to look like those 2 in the back, but you can see all this growth has just flopped over. This doesn't actually hurt the plant, and in fact, these rosettes are the best looking ones of the bunch. But because they've flopped over, I'm going to take these as cuttings. Now, unfortunately, this one took a little damage, so we can start by just cutting that, and we can use that as a guideline for our height. I'm going to take this one to about that same height. These 2 at the back aren't actually flopped over, but they are very top heavy, so I'm going to cut them back at that same height. Just like that. So I'm taking this cutting all the way back to this little elbow where it flopped over. We'll do the same thing with these 2 in the front, and this one too. And just look at the difference it makes. But let's take a look at our cuttings. So we got 8 beautiful stem cuttings here, and these we can portion off all the way down into individual leaves if we want. But look at the rosettes on these, they're just incredible. They're big and beautiful, bright green and succulent. And my favorite way to propagate these is by just taking those crown cuttings. They grow so vigorously that this is really all you need to start a new container. And this is how our floating cutting started. Just one little segment like this. And now look at how much it's grown. As they grow, they separate those leaves and continue to make more from the top. So I like to take them with a good stem on them. That way we can plant them directly in soil, or you can set them in water like our floating cutting. These are some of the most beautiful crown cuttings I think I've ever taken. These root so incredibly fast, you'll start to see growth in a week. It's best to let these new stem cuttings heal for at least 24 hours, but I like to let them heal in the soil that they're going to be in. We can just go around and plant all these little crowns, and these new cuts will actually callus in that dry soil. It's really important that the soil's dry. If it's wet, they can rot. So to make sure that they don't rot, I always use dry soil. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. That's a brand new container. So I'm gonna let this heal for about 24 hours, and then I'm gonna water these in, and they'll start to set down roots immediately. So we'll check back in a couple weeks. But now let's take a closer look at our stem cuttings. And we can cut the longer ones into segments. I usually go about 4 or 5 inches. We managed to get 18 stem segments and 8 crown cuttings. So that's 26 plants total, just from one planter, which is just incredible. And we didn't lose any plants here, we've just shortened them up a little bit. So before we plant these out, I like to strip the bottom leaves. It is important to keep the top upright. If you plant them upside down, they're really not going to grow roots down here. They're going to still try and grow roots from the bottom. So you'll have kind of an upside down cutting with underground rosettes and above ground roots. So you want to keep it upright and just gently strip those bottom leaves. That way we can plant them out nice and deep so they're not too top heavy. They can grow roots all the way down here, all the way up to where you bury them. And if you like, you can try and propagate these leaves. I've actually only had one propagate ever, so it's not my favorite way to go. I would actually rather cut these up into shorter segments. So just as an experiment, let's cut these down into individual segments like this. I'm going to try and keep that stem at the bottom so that we can press them into the soil, just like we did with our crowns. There we go. So now we've got individual leaves with a little bit of stem at the bottom. So this is going to be interesting to compare with our crown cuttings. Once they've been stripped of their leaves, they are just as easy to plant as the crown cuttings. You don't even need to dig. You can just press them into the soil just like that. This is so simple. And these are going to heal overnight in this dry soil, and then I'll come in and water tomorrow. Amazing. Look at how quickly we filled in those empty spots. And this is the same method I've used to grow just about every single container. It's so simple and so effective, we've turned just a few cuttings into an entire garden of succulents. So this is a fairly recent container, and here in the front you can really see that old growth and all of this new growth. But it just looks beautiful, doesn't it? You may notice this plant is actually leaning quite a bit towards the sun. So if you turn it around, that'll help it balance out over time. So that's a really simple bit of maintenance you can do with all your houseplants. So just from a couple plants, we've gotten so many cuttings, I just don't have space for them all right now. To bide a little bit of time, we can set them out in some water. They'll start to grow little white roots after a couple weeks. And even 6 months later, this one is still growing in water, which is just amazing to me. All I do is make sure that it has plenty of water. It's never dried out once. And look at how beautiful that is. So if you don't have the space right now to plant all these, just simply set them in water. All I'm going to do is strip those bottom leaves and let this heal for about 24 hours, and then plop them right in. I think we've done some really nice maintenance today on our stacking jade. We've got more stem cuttings that I know what to do with. We've got a few new containers. We've got a couple extra crown cuttings. Our floating succulent cuttings doing great. Our tiny pots looking good. We've got a new experiment with these single leaf cuttings. And hopefully you can use some of these tips in your succulent garden. If you want to see my favorite method of watering these succulents, you can click on this video right over here. And if you want to see some other succulents, you can click on this one over here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.